you gonna get free this time? Falling into a blue sky mind.
Welcome back to You, Me, and the Elephant with Deb Air. And
Crystal clear.
so today, the question is, are you this? Are you that? Or are you something else? So, as per usual, Crystal Clear and I have been dancing in this space together and without speaking to each other, realizing that this was the episode that was wanting to be formed. So here we are. Are you this? Are you that? Or are you something else?
Is there a fourth option where it's all three?
Hell yeah. And I think the premise of today, the whole reason we have the podcast formulated in the way of questions is because You, Me, and the Elephant, it's the doorway into the space that allows for us to consider that there's more than what we think we are. And I feel that there's always more than we think that we are. And that's part of our evolution in this body, in our humanity. So asking the question, are you this, are you that, or are you something else? Let's just say we live in a world that we're immersed in polarity, right? We're immersed in having to make decisions day in and day out, small ones. What do I have to eat? Do I eat this or do I eat that? Do I take a shower now or do I take a shower later? On it to bigger decisions. Do I leave my job? Do I commit to this relationship or not? So there's always these this or that's or choices we come to the edge of, and they're quite necessary in the world we live in. And the musing today is really about how can we begin to expand the source or resource of how we come to a decision, meaning that there are many things defined to us in our world every day. For instance, a bigger example of this is back in the day, it was the common consensus to know that the world was flat. And when there were people out there that started seeing more and feeling more than what was already defined in front of them, they came to the people in power and said, hey, we're getting more data, we're getting more information, more dimensional reality, if you will. And we actually think that what is real might not be the real that we thought. We think the world is round. And asking a question that's why the question is the doorway in, because if you ask a question in that moment, you're leaving room for the more. You're opening the door. Our whole premise of this particular podcast is we tuck away when we have to be something and we've been identified and we find our security in that, even if it's limiting. I'm a mother, I'm a doctor, I am a woman, I'm a good person. We have all these identities that have been wrapped around us. And I think the elephant represents the parts that don't fit into that model. So we don't necessarily give them the value that they deserve, but they're also, like, the elephant is now, again, another example of opening the door to more of what we can't in this immediacy of moment see or feel. But going back to that example of of the world is round, initially it can be challenging, right? I mean, people were killed when they went to the people in power and said that, because it was directly against what was true. So this episode is really an invitation to say we get it in our own lives, our own experiences, that we're both very devoted to really our own evolution through the embodiment of experiencing more, whether it be our own sensations. We live our life through our body. We just got through a workshop this weekend, and one of the things we talked about is pulling back instead of just labeling things, we pulled it all back and took some of the most simplest things that we interpret in life, which is really what I believe is the universal language, meaning you don't have to speak through words, but our body speaks through sensation, through touch, through receiving touch, through giving touch, through sound. And it doesn't have to be in words. It can be in words, through listening and through speaking, through movement. And some of us are more inclined to go to our body and some of us are less. But the whole point is that those of us that are devoted to saying, I want to explore more while I'm in this body of who I am and what is the star quality of me that came into this body and how can I expand and be and get to witness and get to explore who I really am. And that anything that we know that what we are now is good enough. That's the paradox. When I was younger, huge lover of U2. And one of the things that I heard, Brene Brown just interviewed Bono, and because he wrote this memoir called The 40 Songs of Surrender, it's incredible. One of the things that Brene Brown said that I could really relate to is she talked about she was traveling around Europe with just a cassette tape as a young person. And she said, I had one tape and it was a U2 tape, War. And she told Bono, she's like, the thing that always allowed me to keep coming back to your music and is that that every song had enough room for me to breathe, had enough room for me to feel the ranges of what I feel. Because culturally speaking, we are in a polarity of you're this, you're that. These are very defined ways of who we are, and we kind of adopt those things. And then when we start to feel something different, we feel like we self-judge ourselves, we gaslight ourselves. If we share it with people and say, gosh, I'm actually thinking this, that, and the other that doesn't fit into the cultural norm, we can certainly be gaslit. Because I think that the example I was giving earlier was, I'm a fan of Carl Sagan. Anybody who doesn't know who Carl Sagan is, he's a science wizard, an astronomer, and he was a little bit all those crazy things. But anyways, he has this great video on the fourth dimension. And I think this really amplifies what I'm speaking to right now, is that he talks about two dimensions, and two-dimensional reality is really our polarity. It's like what I just mentioned before, that we're usually looking in solid colors, and we then have specific identities that are wrapped around us. So we're just looking through that lens. And that's what he calls the flatlanders. So the flatlanders can move in two directions, forward and back and side to side. That's it. And then there's one of these crazy flatlanders that all of a sudden looks over to the right, and as this apple that is three-dimensional decides to fly into flatlander territory of two-dimension, this one flatlander goes, wait a minute, did you see that? He sees some aspect of a reality that's different than the identities that they've been wrapped in of two-dimension, forward and back and side to side. And he looks to his friends and he says, did you see that? And they look at him and go, dude, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? In there lies one of the challenges that can keep us feeling afraid or fearful of seeing more, of growing more, of how to grow into a broader experience of who we are. Because part of being in some aspect of embodiment, growth, of consciousness, of realizing that we are an orchestra of cosmic stardust and there are infinite dimensions of who we are, to even titrate it back a little bit. When we start to feel that, initially, we may feel like we're crazy. And I would say that if you are choosing more for yourself, or you're choosing to be willing to be able to see more, to be humbled by it, to be excited by it, to be knocked down times by it, know that you will either feel crazy at times or you will be told that you're crazy at times. Because I really think, my kid even told me that at 7 years old. We were in the car and I was like, hey, I asked him a question about what he loved about his dad. And then he paused and then he said, you know what I love about you, Mom? And I'm like, what? He's like, you're crazy. And then he paused again, and he was young, and he's like, good crazy. And here's maybe a 7-year-old calling me crazy. And he was coming to me, showing me something different in that moment. I don't know if I realized it by just saying, no, good crazy, meaning I'm going to use your languaging because you think you're a good person. He wasn't saying it like this, but he's like, hey, you're good crazy. There's something cool here. There's something more. You show things that aren't like the normal thing. So to go back to the Flatlander, initially that Flatlander, everybody thinks he's crazy until one day the fourth dimension of wind comes in and even creates more of a cosmic influx. The wind comes in, it lifts the Flatlanders up. Suddenly, there's no up and down to a Flatlander until that day. And everybody's Flatlanders' jaws are like, what? Oh my God, there's more? You and I were certainly talking about this, Crystal, that like, and I apologize because I forget who actually originated this phrase, that truth goes through 3 phases. First, it is denied. Secondly, it is violently opposed. And thirdly, it's accepted as self-evident. The world is flat. The world is round. And I think that when we can be okay, because I think we can get imposter syndrome with this, when we start to experience something almost counterintuitive, or I would say counter conditioned from what we were certain about ourselves, about other people. And we were 100% certain until, like, that's the world is flat, until we have more information, we have more experience, we lean into questions that all of a sudden allow a doorway of information, of more dimension, like the wind and the Flatlanders. And you go, oh shit, there's more. And that is part of evolution, meaning you can be 100% certain about who you are and what you believe in. And you can allow your evolution of experiencing more dimension, like the wind, and going, wow, now there's a complete different knowing. There's more information, and therefore there's a different certainty. And it's not that you were wrong in the past. It's that you were that experience and expression of yourself. And now this is what true evolution is like. It's going, oh, things transmute, things change.
To go back to the Brene Brown and Bono interview, I was listening to that probably the same day you were listening to that. And what stuck out to me was when Brene was like, listening to your music allowed the space to be there, the awareness, the perspective. And then she also sidelined that with, but there was not necessarily a fucking solution. And she was like, and that would just get me, but you would draw me back into the space. And there was something, even as you're talking about all of this, and what I find that has happened to me definitely here recently is that as I'm exploring, as I'm in conversation with the 2 polarities, whether it's me and the experience or me and the other person or just me and me, the polarity of me having the 2 perspectives and then welcoming in or even stepping into the space, there can be something a little unraveling, frustrating, scary about taking in more information. And for me, my go-to would be, well, now I've got to do something about it. And it was like, damn it, do I turn a blind eye maybe sometime to offering in more dimension? Because then I feel an obligation of, well, now you have more information and you can't necessarily go back to doing it without, you can never not know, unknow, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, like there's this beauty and there's scary.
An oh fuck
in
moment.
that
Yeah.
There's a WTF moment.
Yeah,
in
definitely.
that.
And that you always bring up the best of points. What you just described and how Brene Brown said, yeah, and you're like, you didn't give me any damn answers. And that's that whole thing of like philosophy. They're like, well, it's like the answer's in the question. And you're like in that moment, like, no, I want a way out, right?
Right.
And in those moments where we sit in the space or we lean into the question or we feel a different sensation that hasn't been defined yet as far as we know through our logic, through our dimensions that we know, that isn't time for the resolution. That isn't time
Mm,
to actually make the decision. But we're so conditioned to make decision. Now, what is important? It's not the time to make the decision, but it is, I believe, an essential piece that leads you to new decisions.
yes, I agree.
One of the things that I think even brought this up is because of literally the women's workshop that we did this weekend. I named it Untether. And some women are like, do I want this? But it speaks to that point of of when we can have these moments where the wind comes into the Flatlanders, all of a sudden you see the shutter opens, you see more, then you land back into your life of how you've created. And that's the WTF moment, because you're like, there's not enough room for all of me here. So there's this moment where there is you, where you see a deeper, broader bandwidth of purity of yourself, and then you land back in your life, and that's like you're wrapped around your conditioning or within your conditioning.
That's
And
right.
so when we have these moments, we all of a sudden can untether from like, here I am, and wait, oh God, that's my conditioning. And then we come back in and they kind of merge and they do these things. And so it's not, I get to a point and I'm just that now, or I'm this. And to your point, it's like, when we see more, it can be scary because we go, how do I integrate this in? And so I think part of what turned me on to speak about this is really have the conversation of the harder part, which is really the elephant part, right? It's like, it sounds great to do personal growth and to expand your heart and to get embodiment work and to move into deeper, broader consciousness. And it can be scary as fuck at the same time. And I think it's important to call that out and know that you don't have to change it all in one day. You don't have to make the decision. You can feel, what does that feel like when I see more? And part of this retreat that we did, we really worked with pulling back the labels of what does it mean to move our body? What does it mean to make sound, to receive sound, to listen? What does it mean to touch, be touched? We have so much atrophy. And I think that atrophy of what I'm calling the universal language of body expression is atrophied in the way that we've either had trauma, let's say with touch, and so we avoid it, or we're hungering for it. So either way, there's different forms of atrophy. It is our way in to the quantum. When we ask the question, when we touch differently, when we receive differently, touch, when we sound differently, and when we can go and just be with, wow, this is a different sensation. It has information, but I don't have to do anything about it right now. Our question is, can you live into the questions more? If you're feeling it's hard to make a decision, ask a question. Ask a question that's not this or about this or that, but ask a question that allows you into the doorway of more. What does this mean to you?
What I appreciate is the invitation, that appealing piece to asking the question to me is, I'm just inviting you in. It's making me think back to the retreat as well. We could easily, for each of the body languages, go, I like to be touched. I don't like to be touched. The invitation is can we come into the middle? Is there that piece of, or are you something else? Is there another place that can be discovered, explored within the question, the invitation? Can you come into the middle? Can you meet me in the place in between?
Yeah. My body softens when you ask that question, because it allows me to not have to be wrong in that moment. Now, I was sharing, some women may be used to talking a lot or making more external noises. Some women may be very quiet. And this isn't just for women, this is for everybody, but I'm speaking of the retreat, and are really quiet and internalized with their sound. And what you're speaking to is, can the extra expressive come in a little bit to find some novelty in sound and vibration that is different enough that allows her or him or they to find another sensation of quality of vibration and sound? And can that person who is quiet, who does not make sound, come out a little bit and explore? And that is exactly what you're saying. If we don't give ourselves permission to get in the middle of things and not have to just be on either pole, then we never can necessarily even get the gateway into more, the gateway into really accessing data of life and experience that we can't yet see. And the beautiful part for those that go, yeah, but you got to make decisions. We got to make decisions from the smallest to the biggest every day. When we begin to just go, wow, I'm not an imposter. This is just what I'm constantly seeing more. And some days we can go, you know what? I just said this to Crystal yesterday. I'm like, yeah, okay, universe, I am so excited about all you're showing me. And we're just going to like take a moment. We're going to just like pause for a minute. We're going to slow it down. And it's not a checkout. It's okay. I got you. And there's digestion time. The point is when you can feel and experience more and go, oh, wow, I had no idea. And oh, wow, I'm seeing more. It's like seeing out of one small window and seeing your whole life and then blowing out a whole big space. When you go back to needing to make that decision, you have a different resource of data that is actually beyond the this or the that. It's a different, robust experience of it. It could be that, or it could be this other thing that I couldn't even see until I allowed it in the space to show me. So we could be perseverating. Do I do this? Do I do that? Do I do this? Do I do that? We come back and we go, oh my God, it was this other thing all along. And that to me is freedom, because we can be certain from what we're certain of, and then we need to let it like go into the ethers and let that come back. And then we're going to be certain about something else. The thing about, we talk about truth a lot. What is the truth? The truth is being honest and authentic with what you know so far, but also recognizing that the truth, the world is flat, the world is round, can be a moving, expanding target. But it's how are we allowing ourselves to relate to what truth is in a moment, and knowing that it can grow, and therefore how we relate to it and what we see changes.
There's so many different examples that are coming to mind. And I can even think of times where I've been almost stuck in the choose this or the other. And it's almost like a little bit of a signal for me that says, like, if you're not in the knowing, definitely take it to the middle. Definitely take it to the third perspective. Ask more questions so that maybe the choice was not even presented. And the struggle was you feeling that you were not in confirmation of one of those two choices in the moment. The question is even very enticing, because it's the invitation is, hey, is that all the choices that I have? I was like, is there a fourth choice? One of the senses that I enjoyed the most about the retreat was the emotions. It was like, these are helpers. These are the friends invited to the party. Let's just take in information and then get curious about what is the next step.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things you said when you're stepping into a decision, and even just saying that, what I realized in hearing you, like if you have two choices, right? You have this or that, because sometimes you can have too many choices. But one of the common denominators of when we are in flux around this, or we're in challenge or polarity with it, is that what we're really asking is like, I need to find myself enough. And it's not about choosing one thing outside of yourself as much as I'm finding what is true for me right now, and I'm walking into this decision. Like it fits me. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to choose something or squeeze into something. And that's why sometimes another choice comes up because you go, oh, this is actually a better fit.
Mhm.
And so that's one of the things that came up. And the other thing is, I think that in a world that, like I said, we're conditioned in a polarity culture, that I remember one of my mentors used to say, love and fear are in opposite directions. And if you're thinking two-dimensionally, that in its purest state, in a two-dimensional concept, is absolutely true. If I am walking like a flatlander and I am walking into fear, I am walking away from love. If I'm walking into and it's love, 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 I'm walking away from fear. But at least from my experience, as I become more dimensional in my experiencing of my life, of my body, of my being, I can actually be experiencing pockets of fear and moments of love simultaneously because I'm an orchestra. It's like there's this and this happening. And most certainly, I think that when things become harder, our dimensions become less. So meaning if fear is taking up the space, then I need to look at that. The invitation is allow yourself, whether it's sometimes we feel conflicted because we go, well, when someone says how you're doing, I'm an evolved person, so I should be saying I'm doing great. And I get this question a lot at the office, and I will look at somebody now. You're not looking at me right now, and I'll be like, well, yeah, I'm great. And within that great is all of the pockets. It's like sometimes there's a moment where I feel pissed. There's a moment where I'm excited. There's a moment I'm scared. There's a moment I'm sad. But these are all the range of me. And so I think it can be conflicting and we can judge, wow, I'm feeling sadness right now. But I'm really grateful. What if I'm feeling sadness and I'm really grateful? We said this last time, the and is part of the space. Can we allow more than one thing at a time to be true about us? And I think that can be very helpful when we're either being gaslit by somebody else or certainly by ourselves. We can gaslight ourselves super easily with the internal dialogues. And I think that changes also when we're gaslit. I am not saying that we should not speak up about that, but is it a moment where the culture and what you've just been able to expand beyond the culture clash? And how do you support yourself and the ones that also are the crazy ones, like Crystal and I?
Mm.
How do you support one another within the space and say, I see you're crazy and I raise you're crazy.
Yeah.
And for whatever that looks like, if you're having that moment, just ask a question. Byron Katie's questions are great. The first two, I think, how do you know this is true? I think the
Right.
second one is, how do you absolutely know this is true?
Mm.
There are a lot of great tools or questions and to ask. And then also our invitation is, do you touch your body? And if you touch your body, can you touch it in a different way? Can you just take your arms and just massage them for a moment, like you've just landed in the moment? Can you just notice how you speak, the tone in which you speak? We did that at the retreat. Said,
Mhm.
can I help you? And people would grab different emotions. Sometimes it was angry, or can you help me? It's like, can you help me? It could be sensual. Can you help me?
Mm.
Can you explore in that? And can you find another crazy human to explore with? Because I can guarantee you, as you enhance that map of your universal language of body, in also ask questions, you're going to find yourself more at peace with trusting when the answers need to come and
Mhm.
allowing yourself to be different than you thought you were yesterday. So thank you yet again for really sitting in the space, opening the door right into that big, beautiful elephant of life. And I just so appreciate being able to do this, being able to sit down with you all, or maybe you're running or walking, whatever it is. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Until next time. And now, Trevor Hall with Blue Sky Mind.
through the body. It's Sinning through the body.